Hey everybody tuning in online, thank you for checking in with us today. Everybody who's here, welcome to Flutter Atlanta. My name's Emmett Dean. I am the manager of engineering here at Black Airplane, which is this building that we're in. I basically lead the Flutter team here. I have a background in native Android and iOS development, and I've been using Flutter for over 3 years now with over 12 Flutter apps published in various senses, and I use it so much that I also use it for my own side projects. I want to give a quick shout out to Black Airplane. Thank you for the food, the beer, even though I think we may be out right now, and for letting us use this space for this awesome meetup. Just so you guys know, we have a special team here that produces top quality work, and we're capable of producing pretty much anything. So if you need help developing whatever you're looking for, make sure to reach out. Today we are going to be talking about FlutterFlow, but before we hop into that, I want to give a quick congratulations. I don't know if you're tuned in online, Dylan, but Dylan Cross just launched his first Flutter app called Biblingo. So he got hired to basically build the mobile app. This was an existing web application leading up to this, but it helps you learn all of the biblical languages. I won't butcher the pitch, but yeah, go check it out if you're into that. Just wanted to give a shout out to one of our members here that launched his first Flutter app. Really
great. Clap, clap, clap.
So I'm going to just briefly describe what is FlutterFlow in case you guys didn't do any research before you came. FlutterFlow is just a low-code or no-code tool for building applications with Flutter. So instead of making a whole bunch of slides, I'm literally going to walk through the website and then kind of walk through a little sample project that they have, and we can kind of dig into the capabilities of it. So first, let's head over to just the FlutterFlow landing page to see how they're pitching this to various developers. So first thing you'll see is that they're pitching, like most no-code or low-code tools, build applications faster than ever, create beautiful UI, generate clean code, and deploy to the app stores or web in one click. And it's fully extensible with custom code. That, I think, is really important because this is not normally the case with these low-code and no-code tools. If we head down to this little demo, it's almost showing like this Figma style with the multiple cursors interacting, but actually building this app in Flutter. The drag and drop is super interesting, and it's pretty cool once we get into it a little bit more. Of course, they list off all the different companies that are actively using it. They have some different FlutterFlow applications that you can look at just as demos. And then here's a nice little message from Tim Sneath, who's really big in the Flutter space. And he said, FlutterFlow provides tooling that helps real-world developers and users build apps using it. It's straightforward, easy-to-use tool that can generate very powerful results. FlutterFlow brings the power of a rich platform to everybody. This is really exciting because, as you guys know, the big no-code or low-code tool push is just enabling more people that don't necessarily have high-end development experience to be able to build pretty much anything. And the features they have here are very rich. So again, the biggest thing they have is their visual drag and drop builder, which we'll experiment with in a second. They have easy data and API integrations. The biggest one of those is Firebase. Most of their sample projects just hook directly into Firebase, and you're able to kind of drag and drop and hook up those elements to Firebase, which is really impressive. And then also multi-language apps. If you needed to localize this, they boast a very nice integration where you just hit Google Translate. It'll translate all of the text in your app and go ahead and support the internationalization for you. So a big thing compared to other no-code tools is the ability to customize everything. So for their less proficient programmers, they also have a visual action builder. So instead of actually writing code for the action, you can kind of do conditional logic steps, which is great for also learning programming early on. And then they have fully custom widgets. So they actually have a code editor in here where you can go in and edit each individual line of code, and then also add your custom functions, which you can call from anywhere of your normal widgets with the widget builder. Here are, of course, some more testimonials and some examples of apps here. So yeah, we don't have to dig into all of their features. We kind of hit that on the home page. I do want to point out the pricing, though, because it can get expensive depending on what you're using it for. This isn't just a free tool. What I'm going to show you today is just this free tier with a demo project, just so we can explore kind of what the screens look like. But after that, you're looking at $30 a month. But in my opinion, by the time you publish an app, you're probably in this $70 a month, just because of some of these extra things like the GitHub integration and the actual app and Play Store deployment. Yeah.
Near the beginning, you said that it's fully extensible and that is unique And by golly, I have never known what that means. Does that just mean the code download part? You get to get your code back?
Yep, so they have a button here. If you pay for the pro version, you can preview the code, which we'll look at today. But you could theoretically just download the code, load it into VS Code, and then continue editing it.
Got it.
Theoretically. I've not built a whole project out and exported the code and tried to really get in there. I will point out some things in the code today that, you know, as no code and low code goes, it is not quite up to snuff of what a professional developer would build, or it's not as human readable. So that's just something that we'll look at as we get there. Right. So I have a project pulled up. This project is not something I built out by scratch. They have a couple templates here, but this is a real estate application. And it looks great. Again, all of this is built in Flutter code, which is great because Flutter apps are awesome. If you weren't here for that talk, you can basically build for 6 platforms off of one code base. It's extremely performant, really high rendering rates, and it's great for pretty much everything, including web, although that's still probably its weakest platform right now. And this allows you to take advantage of that awesome framework without having to get really, really good at it yourself. But first, let's just look at this screen and kind of check out this drag and drop editor. So you're able to kind of hover over and see all of the different elements. If you've done Flutter before, you'll notice these widget names kind of match up. So you have like the text field on this right-hand side. You have all of the various styling, very easy to add padding. Again, this feels very Figma-esque. So there's a little bit of a connection here between being able to import from Figma as well and translate that directly into some level of Flutter UI code. They also have, you know, their action editor, which we could look at this, or this one isn't an action. Let me hop on like the search bar. If we open this, yep, so then it has a navigate to the search properties. You're going to navigate to a screen if you hit this search with whatever you typed into this form field. You can add backend queries, which we can look at like something like this, where it's going to be pulling like the property name off of a Firebase document, which we'll look at more. And then they have very easy animations if you want to trigger an animation on a mode or on an action trigger. All of these different things, documentation for yourself. So as you can see, just right off this first build page, this is really impressive. The drag and drop truly is drag and drop. I can literally just drag an element in here, drop it, and then start editing it just like that, which is really impressive. They have toggles for light and dark mode if you're building your app to have that. They have different display options, so you can display the device. Let me see here. You can actually select all of the different like popular phone sizes to easily switch. You can do an iPad if you want to see what it's looking like there, or of course different desktop sizes. So honestly, just after this, I was wishing that VS Code had this level of preview in it just for when I'm writing my own code. Like I wish that I had another tab open where I could see this instead of doing hot refresh, because this is almost better than hot refresh. But again, this is just the first screen. Let's keep digging into what this really looks like. Switch this back to a mobile view really quick. So this next screen is, or this next tab is really going to be kind of like if you're used to Photoshop or again Figma, these are just all the layers. So the way Flutter builds UI is a tree system. So you're going to have like a column, and inside the column it's going to have all of these elements. So this makes it very easy to navigate through all of these different drag and drop elements and kind of get a hierarchical view of what's going on. I'm not sure if you guys can see this, so let me know if you can. But for example, this project came hooked up with Firebase. So if I click on this list view, it says there's a query collection here. So if I go to the edit backend query, it's going to look for the Firebase collection called properties and list out all of the documents, and then it's going to basically inject that into this widget tree down here so that those items can use it later on. But that makes it very intuitive once you get the hang of it, and if you look at an example project like this, all of this so far is way simpler than going through a 20+ hour Flutter course learning how to actually write code for Flutter. Something else that's different, or that you might not normally think of unless you've done maybe Swift iOS development, is they include what's called a storyboard. And this is really nice. This is something that normal Flutter development doesn't have either, where you can basically get a visual sense of how all of your screens connect together. And you can very easily say, this button is going to go to this screen, this button is going to go to this screen, and it allows you to kind of visually lay all this out, which is super helpful for both developers and designers. Once you zoom out too far, it doesn't show you the previews anymore. But
That's
yeah.
something you get in Swift?
Yeah, so Swift, you basically have or at least the old UI kit, a lot of people have switched to Swift UI, which I'm not sure how much storyboarding you still do, but you actually do all of your layouts in a storyboard proprietary file type that Apple provides. And you can do very similar, this button goes here or hooks up to this action. So I believe that's kind of where this is getting inspiration from. So those three tabs are basically the build section here. So again, this is really impressive. Oh, go ahead.
I just want to ask another thing about the storyboard. Is that, when you go in there, are you editing that, or is that a read-only kind of display of what you've worked on?
I believe you can edit this. Let me get in here. Yeah,
okay,
so if I
yeah.
were to select this, I can go in and kind of, you're really editing the connections, not the screens.
Yes.
Yeah.
Got it.
And this is still on the free tier?
Yeah, so everything I'm showing you is free tier. I haven't paid anything yet. Most of the paid portions of it are going to be related to publishing your app, exporting your app, everything like that. They're willing to allow you to build everything, and then it's like, oh, now you actually want to send it out into the world, now pay. But yeah, so this is the build tab. All of this is what you need to know for building your app. The next set of tabs is called Connect, which is going to be mainly hitting your custom APIs or your Firebase collection. So let's look at that. This again all came with this template. So they basically have this Firestore collection set up for you, where you have a collection of properties, which is what we were looking at. We're looking at that property list. So you're able to go in all from FlutterFlow and set up what your schema looks like. So your property name, the description, all of the fields that you're actually going to use in your app. You can do it from here instead of having to go to Firebase or Firestore separately and set all of that up. So this level of integration is really, really awesome. They have different Firestore settings here. You can manage all your indexes, your Firestore rules, and everything. So this helps people who are new or who haven't worked with Firebase before or just want to make it easier on themselves understand this without having to also go learn Firebase completely separately from Flutter. And if you're not using Firebase with your Flutter app, you should definitely look into it. I think they said that like an absurd number of 60–70% of Flutter apps are using Firebase. They just pair extremely well together. So definitely consider looking at that for your backend if you're not already using it. The next interesting thing, and if you're in the Flutter space, you've probably heard that state management is something that's really controversial, or there's so many options for state management. So here they have a really nice, easy way to do app state without actually having to explain to the user all the ins and outs of state management. And when we look at the code, you'll see this is not using any popular state management library, which is kind of one of the downfalls to the code. It's using just the out-of-the-box stateless and stateful widgets for everything. So we'll look at that in a minute. But if you wanted to persist app state, it's very easy. You can just have these various variables that are going to live over the length of the app. And also there's an option to persist them. So just by a flip of the switch, you completely close the app and reopen it, your variable will automatically reload for you. So they did all of that kind of behind the scenes logic of storing this data locally for you just at the flip of a switch, which is really nice. Digging deeper, you have different API calls. So you can add various API groups or calls. This is going to feel very similar to something like Postman, but it makes it really easy. If you've worked with an API before, you can just kind of drop in your URLs, the methods, all of your headers, query parameters, and everything, and then you can just access this as easy as they were accessing Firebase in the actual builder itself or in the actions. You also have project media, which your team could upload various images or whatever you need, assets that you're going to be using in the project. Then we get to the custom code section. So they have 4 main sections here. You have, of course, your main.dart file. A lot of times you have to edit this just for specific setup reasons if you have a special package. And then you have your custom actions if you want to write entire actions with code, custom widgets if you wanted to write a completely custom widget with code, or also your custom functions, which they have 2 examples here. And this basically has kind of a template for you. So as you can see, it says modified code only below this line and only above this line. So it just gives you a really nice base. All I have to do, write this much code. So for somebody who's entry level or just starting to learn the programming side of things, they kind of know exactly where they need to do things, which is great. Then you also have, go ahead.
Can you go back to that last?
Yep.
What's the OpenAI codex?
I believe they have, yeah, so they have recently released a feature now, both in the UI builder, I haven't seen it in the UI builder yet, and then here, where you can ask OpenAI to solve your problem for you. So everything from build me a screen that is a list of all of these properties, and then hopefully it spits out the right thing, or like here, we could enter a question for a function, and then it would theoretically write it for us.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. There's also theme settings, so you can actually import a theme directly from Figma and map it into your FlutterFlow, so your designers can really get in here and start to play around and make sure it matches design, which is really powerful. Of course, set up all of your different typography and icons, pretty much going off of the material design spec. It makes it very nice to actually see all of that visually versus in code. And then, of course, just your typical app settings. This is where you're going to set up your package names, all of your screenshots, splash screens, everything here, setting up Firebase, all of that. They do also have a partnership with CodeMagic for app deployment, which is what we recommend for CI/CD. It makes it really easy to actually deploy apps. And this is really powerful. This means you can write and build an iOS app 100% in the web browser, not on a Mac machine, which is big for a lot of people. The biggest thing for iOS development that's a pain is you had to have a Mac to build an iOS app. Well, that's no longer the case, especially with this. The fact that we're doing all of this in a browser right now is truly unbelievable. So now let's get into my biggest critique, which is really the code. If we were to hit this button up here and hit view code, this is when I'm actually going to be able to get into the files here. So if we were to go and break this down from my point of view, right now I'm looking at a file called homepage_main. This isn't following any good naming schema. I think this is something you could fix because you can name the pages yourself, but this is definitely not following like standard Flutter naming schema. Getting into this, again, you'll see it's a stateful widget. You're not using any sort of block state management or Riverpod or GetX or any of the normal state managements that you would typically see in a Flutter project, which you normally use those because the code can get really messy once you dig into it. So other than that, this is fairly readable. I mean, this is a fairly big file still, a couple hundred lines, but it's normal-ish Flutter code. If you start looking for little things like some navigation, sometimes you'll find some weird widgets that start with FF that'll trigger like an action or something like that, which stands for FlutterFlow, or they're pulling a special FlutterFlow theme in here. So there's a couple things that are very specific to FlutterFlow that are built into their code, which isn't great really because that means it's going to be harder to transition out of FlutterFlow. But the fact that we can even get this close to where I can export code, it's mostly human readable, is really, really impressive. I think this is something that they will continue to improve on, and it's already a lot better than I expected it to be. Some other nice things, you can see it on the right in the preview kind of the page. Again, I wish VS Code had this, but I can click on one of these things and it will show it to you in code, or like this is a set of widgets. So I just clicked on this text widget and really it's wrapped in and expanded, and it's showing all the animations that they have added, which is a helper of custom to FlutterFlow and everything. So yeah, I think this is my main goal here, was to try and cover basically what FlutterFlow is and what the capabilities are. I guess let's open it up to you guys. What do you guys think after seeing this?
Can you do any sort of deployment with the free tier, or?
I think you have to have a paid tier for the deployment.
Okay. With the first one, can you deploy any?
I believe so. Let's look. You can do a code download and an APK download. So you could do an Android deployment. And if you do the code download, you could run your own deployments. You get their easy deployment system with the $70 a month tier.
Okay.
It's striking me that this might be most powerful for learning and on-ramping.
Mhm.
I don't know, what's your take?
I have heard that it's been used really successfully in quick proof of concepts. So like if you had a really big application that was proposed in like an enterprise, and they just want to see if the one core piece of functionality, they can pull it off, they'll build it here because they can just, and in a couple hours, have something that's halfway decent and present it.
Got
I
it.
feel like that makes the most sense. Because looking at the code, it doesn't seem like the code's not clean, right?
Yeah,
It's
right.
very janky.
Yeah,
and
it's very,
spread out.
But if it's a prototype, that's
But
all
yeah,
you
it doesn't
need.
matter if it's a prototype.
Right.
But if I'm trying to learn Flutter, I don't know if this would be the
Ah.
best case for that scenario, right?
That's a good
I'm
point.
not learning good practices and stuff.
while we're here, let's watch their little video for the text to app OpenAI. I know everybody loves all the AI talk right now, so we might as well. So I don't know what paid tier you have to be in for this. I don't know how well it works. I'm sure you guys have played with AI in your own spare time, and half the time it's great, half the time it's not. A lot of the time, once I have it write anything more than a function, it starts hallucinating on itself. So it's still pretty hit or miss right now, but this is cool to see. I think it's just interesting. It'll be fun to play with.
I mean, why not try to type a sentence into the one you had there? It seemed like it would take it.
This one was for just writing an individual function, which we could do in our function description. We could just do, I don't know, what's something you would want to know? What's a good like little programming problem? Reverse a string.
Oh, okay.
Let's see what it is. Because I'm sure they have their own prompt and everything that's like write this in Dart,
Yeah.
et cetera, et cetera. I'm surprised they even let me do this on the free tier though.
Right, that's what I was curious about.
We'll see if this ever loads. So. Well, this does not seem right.
Well, I'll note that the you did this for the custom function rating summary,
Okay.
so that's why we have the strange name. And also, the function doesn't take in strings; it takes in doubles. So
Yes.
you kind of asked it to.
I thought
Square
this
peg,
was
round
a
hole.
new one. Let me try this again. Just name this. So does that mean I need, okay. Does that mean I need to give it, so it's taking back a string. Do I have to add arguments? Here we go. Just call it str. String, not nullable, not nullable. Getting an error.
You're not returning anything.
Yeah, let's just see. Reverse the given string by the argument. See how it does. I'm sure it will do fine at this, but.
Nice.
Looks pretty good.
That's a,
Yep. Okay, and then you have to copy it yourself, and now it's gone.
Everyone's moving fast to get this stuff in, I think.
Let me check this chat real quick. See it just on the laptop screen. What does it support for routers? Only its own, or can it use Go router? I believe they use their own internal routing system, Randall. I think everything is very managed by them, which is why they're able to kind of produce their own code. Any other NoSQL solutions besides Firebase, and how about SQL mappings? I think you would have to probably spin up your own API on top of your custom database, which they support through this kind of API call. Firestore is just the out of the box kind of solution that they use since it's so popular. Yeah, 27 layers of indent on the code export, yep. Flutter Flex Color Scheme Playground, I wonder if FF uses Flex Color Scheme plugin under the hood. I also noticed that, especially on that AI preview, there's a popular theming plugin that this guy Sava is talking about called Flutter Flex, which is a lot of popular material color things, and it looks like they might be using that out of the box to kind of help you get started. So what are y'all's thoughts? I know you have an app that's live.
Yeah.
Do you see this and you're like, shit, I should have built it all in FlutterFlow? Or are you like, no, I'm happy that I'm not tied to this platform, I'm not paying the $70 a month? What do you think this would have affected you and your process?
The the cost doesn't totally throw me off, although feeling any sense of being locked in, you know, makes me want to keep some distance from any particular tool, which is why I also don't use, you know, like I don't have a state management, you know, package that I use, you know, for mine either. But that's maybe just because I didn't super explore that whole world. I think basically, you know, what y'all said about like, is this a really useful, like fast prototyping thing? Would that have jump-started my work? You know, possibly. But then again, I was also like learning Dart and Flutter at the same time. So I still think like the time and sweat equity I put into all this stuff, you know, got me to a place where I know I can move more quickly, I think.
Yeah.
But
A larger time investment up front, but now it's worth it.
yeah, I think so. But I don't want to discredit like when new tools are coming out, right? I want to like really think like how powerful could this be or could this have been, you know? So
How many of you
Definitely.
have built a Flutter app just in code? Okay. So are you guys seeing this? How do you feel? Are you like, oh, I should have used this. I should have never learned Flutter because I could have just built it with this, or
I don't think so. I mean, I like the idea of mocking up new features quickly, like again, like we talked about, proof of concept stuff. Yeah, I don't know. I feel it's hard for me to say like complete total replacement.
I feel like the amount of time I put into learning Figma to get it as interactive as I wanted to, could have put it into this and it had some semblance of Dart code I could use at the end of it versus going, this works great in Figma. Now I gotta start all over. So it's definitely, I see this being like a really good like UXE tool that they then pass off to engineers and they're like, make it actually work.
That's a good point. It'd be cool to give this to like our designers and see what they do with it.
so Martin, you haven't built a Flutter app before. Are you seeing this now and debating, should I learn Flutter or should I just build the project I want to build in FlutterFlow? And where are you at?
Well, right. So I think it's like this. This sounds really interesting, and then I come more from the web, web stack. I feel like this can, a tool like this can really get me into the whole building something and through the whole deployment and mobile thing. What I'm trying to figure out is, okay, I can maybe take a hit. If I'm not doing an app that may live on forever, $70 for doing a full deployment. Do I just need to pay that for a month when I need to deploy it, and then do I scale back, or am I locked into having to pay $70 a month for what can essentially be a hobby app or something?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's what I'm not seeing this clear. Like if I just needed to be like deploy something, say if I wanted to be like for the World Cup or something, like right.
Yeah.
If I want to deploy some sample when I want to play something, right, it's going to be for a month or so. We're going to be pushing some updates or things like that. So I only need it for like a month or two, but I don't want to kill the app after a month. Will I still need to keep the thing, or can I get the app stay live and I can downgrade tiers?
Yeah,
That's the only like lock-in that I'm like, okay, can I then just like downgrade it and
yeah, I think you probably can, depending on what level of integrations you use. Like I guess if you use like the GitHub integration once you go to the Pro, and then something would probably lock you in from going back with it. I think that it's really interesting to put this in a designer's hands, because designers are so capable with Figma now. This doesn't feel that much different than Figma, other than a lot of pre-built components. They could probably build something fairly high-end with low technical knowledge and then have an engineer come in and just do the parts that they couldn't figure out. You may be able to do that at a very cost-effective way for an application. Will the code be up to snuff with a completely professionally built app? Definitely not. But a lot of apps don't necessarily need that in the real world. So that's something that you could consider. Let's see. Any comments online? Saba asks, what are the dependencies? It can be for prototyping, especially if you turn to Figma. handle Unicode, reverse string. What are the dependencies? I'm not sure. I wonder if we can find that out real quick.
When you exported the code, you saw a lot of imports.
Okay, allowed to access the So this project has a lot.
Oh, wow.
Okay, a lot of Firebase, sure.
Yeah, a lot of Firebase related things. They're using some auto building stuff. Apple.
I do wonder what point it gets too cumbersome, right?
I'm sorry?
Like, I wonder if the apps at some point become too slow or clunky.
Yeah, and again, I haven't built like a large production app here to tell you like, oh, it's clearly runs worse than if you built it with custom Flutter. That's one big thing I have against other no-code, low-code platforms like Bubble. I'm sure you guys have also heard of Bubble for basically no-code. Oh, well, let's compare it to that. Let's head over to Bubble. So we've had people come to us here with MVP apps built with Flutter, or not with Flutter, with Bubble, and they were terrible, like 30-second load times to pull up a screen. Also, this is light mode, which is terrible for this presentation. I can see all this, so I'm going to go away from this screen. But yeah, so Bubble, the biggest thing that's an advantage about FlutterFlow is that it still uses Flutter. So we know under the hood that it's going to produce an app that theoretically could perform well. Then you're just relying on FlutterFlow, hopefully to make it easier. You're getting all the advantages of the framework that's constantly updating and the reason we're all here and love it. So I think that is a really big selling point. I have shown this to a couple people who don't know how to build apps, but they have a startup idea. They want to build an app. I think this is a possible product that could support those people. I'm just not sure. I'm not sure if it's going to completely replace real developers yet. Who knows? These tools are becoming more and more popular and they're becoming better and better. Maybe one day we'll get there, but it still feels like we're a little ways off.
This feels in a similar conversation to AI conversations, right? And like literally this is integrated within, right? But that like a tool that gets good enough that writing the raw code is no longer relevant. And I don't want to sit pretty, like assuming that will never happen. That's not a good posture to take. So I'm glad to know about these things and know where they're at.
Yep. Also backed by Y Combinator, if you're in the startup space at all, that's basically the Harvard of startup incubators. So top of the top here. And they won some awards from Product Hunt, which is also a good sign.
Golden Kitty.
Don't really know what that means, but I'm sure it's
Internet Awards.
Awesome. Well, do you guys have any questions further on this before we wrap up?
Thanks for showing it. It's really cool.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting tool.
Any questions online? I guess included. Yeah, with the PubSpec YAML Saba, I'm not sure what level of tree shaking they would be doing to try and get rid of what's not used. I think they're actually doing it ahead of time based on what you're dragging and dropping into your app, only importing the things that their widgets need. Although their widgets might just have a lot of requirements because they're trying to be versatile as drag and drop reusable elements.
Can you have multiple projects, multiple apps going at the same time?
You can, yeah. Yeah, let me see if I can go back to my home real quick.
Of course, your free tier might be limited in some way or something.
Yeah.
Is there a limit of projects and
I'm sure there is, but
pages or?
here y'all can at least see, like this was the one that I showed you today, the demo project, but they have like a decent little set here of pretty impressive looking demo projects, which would be great for people learning to kind of get some experience in. If you hover over them, it tells you how many screens it is, if it's using Firestore, all of those kinds of things. And then they also have a marketplace, which is pretty cool. It's kind of like pub.dev, where we're going and looking at packages, that the Legos for your app, in a sense. Now I can come in here and now we have a navbar page with animation that works with FlutterFlow. So they're almost getting their own little ecosystem inside of this, which is kind of cool to see.
Huh. You could get really deep in
That's
on.
pretty cool. Do you buy those, or can you make some to sell those?
I'm not sure if they're for sale or if they're all free. This one's just add to project. It's kind of interesting to see what they are. These are things that you would think are fairly easy in a normal Flutter project, but there's a whole separate item for it.
you know, whatever's popular here maybe shows you what our current tension points and rough edges, right?
Yep. Don't
Interesting.
see one that costs money, Clone Project. That's like an entire shopping app. These all seem free right now, which is pretty crazy.
Cool.
Yeah, you can have organization. Obviously, they showed on that kind of preview that you could work with teams together. Not quite sure what that looks like in practice, but it looks pretty interesting. Awesome. Let's see. I don't have any new questions online. Any questions before we wrap up?
Maybe just one for the crowd. I mean, has anyone built something using a tool like this? Whether for just for fun or all the way to putting it on a store?
I've done no-code websites. I haven't done
Right.
no-code.
I mean, I've done Google sites if that counts, right?
Yeah, that's probably like the closest thing. Like
Sure.
to me, this feels very similar to Webflow. I built a Webflow site before, and I don't know if you guys have heard of that one. Talk about vendor lock, trying to cancel my subscription to Webflow. It's one of the most painful things ever. But again, this looks very similar.
So this looks, there's one for React called Plasmic. So,
Plasmic,
Yeah,
is it React or React Native?
it's React,
Okay.
but they have kind of a very similar thing where,
That's cool.
That's nice.
It is interesting. It does feel like we're getting closer and closer to a world of really you need to decide, is it faster for me to just use a no-code tool? And as an engineer, should I be using a no-code tool because it's faster and gets me there quicker? Like what are these like for just productivity enhancement?
Biggest thing to me is the scope of the project.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're in it for the long haul, you probably want to build with a strong foundation. And I don't know if it's kind of the inefficient code
Yeah.
world. Because the second that you run into something you can't do in FlutterFlow that you know you can do in the original language, tension point, like what do you do?
Yeah.
yeah, it becomes into like, well, Plasmic gives you a lot more freedom and things like that. It's really about who's going to be the user.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, if you need to get an MVP out the door, like, that's a no-brainer.
Right.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see how much time it would take to go back, like get a basic project and then go back in and clean everything up. Like what would that time loss?
Right. You can really tweak, like that's really worth trying to figure out that math because that's interesting.
Yeah.
That sounds like a weekend project.
I feel like if you built, or this app that we looked at where it was like 29 screens, I think something around there, refactoring this with like a popular state management, you're probably just going to decide to rewrite the whole thing. Like you're going to get through like the first 5 screens and you're going to be like, screw this. At least that's my assumption. Looking at a whole bunch of pages that look like this, again with the 40 levels of indentation, none of this is really broken down into separate widget classes, at least not well. Like, could be fairly.
If you don't like one of the dependencies,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
okay.
all these things really, like these no-code tools are really good for brochure, like things where you have a lot of data and you need to show it. Like it's a lot of reading, consuming, but any tool where, anything when you start doing interaction,
Mhm.
that's where all these break.
Yep.
Like the second where you need to start building any kind of interaction with it, or it becomes more app, it's less about consuming, that's when they start really breaking, and that's when.
Yeah, you don't have as much control that you would need.
Right, like when you have to start doing forms and the business rules come in, and that's where all these kind of tools break. That's where, usually that's the hard parts of
Yeah.
things.
Custom cases, unique circumstances.
Yeah,
If you're making if you're making a real estate app just like this, then you may actually be on the right track by doing this.
I mean, this will start for the easy cases, but once you get into like, oh, this one use this case, and then you can't, you may be able to solve for one case, but then you get into that next one, and then it just blows up.
Also, I saw they had like card numbers and stuff persisting in app state. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
There's a lot of things.
I type my card number in, close the app, open it again, it's still there.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. Makes sense.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in online. Next time we're going to be making a game in Flutter. We'll probably be looking at the Flame engine, which is the popular 2D kind of game engine that was built on top of Flutter. So we'll be looking at that next time.